Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Circle of the World podcast, where we discuss Joe Abercrombie's First Law series. I am one of your hosts, Lord Chamberlain Jeffrey, and here are my co-hosts,
Archlick the George.
And Harrison, the Adeptus Historical.
We continue our coverage of The Heroes, Joe's second standalone, and the next First Law entry. We cover the moment of truth, spoils, desperate measures, and stuff happens. So let's get started. Just as usual, wanna thank you all for your support. For your support. Continue to request to join the Discord. It is growing and we are adding channels. George is getting a little crazy with it, but he's adding channels left and right.
We needed one. I didn't realize there was nowhere to post the memes. So
Yeah.
good,
Yep,
good
we got
one for that.
memes there. We got music, books, all that kind of stuff.
Goms. We got
Mhm.
Goms too.
Yeah, and so we see some more comments on the YouTubes, which we appreciate. I know we probably said this last week, but I'm gonna take them to task for it now. Boys, any progress on those YouTube videos?
Yes, actually, I've cut it down, the video that me and Trey recorded in August. So it's been cut down from 4 hours to 2.5 hours, and I'm just working on doing some stuff for the actual video, and it will be up by Friday next week. I promise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sweet.
A solemn oath.
A solemn oath. Okay. Okay. And Harrison, you want to say something? Because I called you out too. You have to say words. Say words.
The man has a child now. He can't do anything about it.
I believe George has put it succinctly. I am like Mel Gibson in The Patriot. I hide behind my children. Anyways, that's an obscure reference. But anyways,
All right.
yes,
All
no,
right.
I have failed, Jeffrey. You give me punishment as you see fit.
Oh, well, didn't you record the episode, the video, or no? Did you record it at all, and you just need to edit it, or did you?
I didn't
not
do
even...
anything, Jeffrey.
You didn't do anything. You know
I am
what?
wretched.
All right, yeah, you are.
I am wretched.
Less than wretched.
Whatever. You are less than wretched. You just give me whatever notes you have on whatever your video is going to be about. I'll do it. Jesus Christ. Somebody gets a baby and then it's like their life changes. Oh, all right. All right. Cool. All right. So we'll just we'll go on through our first chapter read-through. Is going to be our first segment because we got 4 chapters to do for y'all today. And this one is The Moment of Truth. And we start this chapter off from the perspective of our boy, Corporal Tunney. And, well, folks, the moment of truth has arrived. Colonel Valamir is asking them, like, hey, are the Northerners, still there? Like, what? And then they have to be like, yeah, don't you see those spears sticking out over there by the wall again? And then Valamir's like, bitch, we're going to attack anyway. Fuck it. And so, because they've been waiting for a long time. And, the entire day. And so at some point, they just got to make a move. They got to go. So he goes, we get the men ready to charge. And then Yoke is scared. He's like, oh, that's it then? And he's like, uh-huh. And Tunney, when this kind of thing happens, Tunney turns into a different person. Because so far from what we've seen of Tunney, we imagine him to be a scoundrel, right? He robs civilians. He sells their shit. He pockets,
a scallywag, I believe, is more appropriate.
Scallywag, okay.
Scallion.
Right, a rapscallion. Ooh, like that one. Ooh. But it's just funny because he's the standard bearer of His Majesty's First Regiment, and see, as he's unfurling that standard, he does it like he's loving. He does it lovingly. And he doesn't feel fear at all, actually. Apparently, it's the other much more dangerous thing, which I think he gets up for a battle. I think my boy, he gets rock hard. And so he sorry, and he's like whispering to the standard. He's like, "Here we go. Oh, here we bloody go." Ooh. And then as soon as they get ready, and as soon as Force says charge, Tony just dips. He runs. He's leading the men, and he's charging down the slope, and then he gets into the middle of the stream. He turns around, starts waving this bad boy, and he's like, "On you bastards! On the first forward!" He's losing his mind. It's like, oh shit! And then
I think this is depicted really well, right? Like somebody who is like really amping himself up. Like we actually, at least on this side of the battle, with the main perspective we've seen is Gorse, who doesn't have himself up. He's already ready to go. But like Tunney, reminded that he's a normal dude, but he's seen a lot of shit. He's a veteran, and how does he get ready when he's actually having to go into battle? This is what he does, and I think it's depicted really well.
Oh yeah,
I love the fact that he does that as well. He's just like, he doesn't hold back, and he takes this duty so seriously, and he's got this like patriotic pride, and it's like that tugging in his heartstrings. Like, I'm gonna go, I'm gonna do it.
Jingoism has this man.
Exactly, jingoism. It's the most powerful force on earth. Can move a lazy man.
And you were saying it's so out of character?
It's so out of character, but at the same time, it kind of isn't, which is brilliant.
It's great. It's great. As he's losing his mind, Yolk and Worth are charging after him, and Worth is like, "I'm hit. Apparently, he's just by bird shit, and so Tony, hauls him up, and they turn. And they're running up towards the other side, on the other banks of the stream. He climbs up towards the wall, and he's like in one hand with the standard, and his other hand he draws his sword, and he's screaming at the top of his lungs, and he swipes away at the spears. Then he kind of realizes that the spears just fell over, and there's no one there. They just laid up a bunch of pole arms all against the wall, and a scarecrow, by the way, and a scarecrow. And other than that, that's it. That's it. The fighting was over, right? They could tell that the again, no one is there, and as well as the battle that was near, back where like Prince Calder was or whatever.
I mean, we know they've already had the peace talks.
Yeah,
kind of.
So Tony and them, they're like, okay. Like they can see people jogging, they can see Northmen jogging, but like they're chilling. They're not pressed. It's not like a retreat. They're just doing their own thing. And and Yolk is funny because Yolk, as he runs up, he's like, yeah. And then the last one, he goes, yeah. And there's like, no one's here. It's weird. And they, besides the scarecrow, and then one of the men goes up to the scarecrow and goes, "Lay down your arms in the name of His Majesty," and they all laugh, ha ha ha. But then they stop laughing when Colonel Valamir and Sergeant Forrest walk through, and they're just Valamir is pissed. He just has his face is he's not happy because they've been waiting for so damn long, and he was like, "Fuck it, they needed to fight," and now he's gonna think, "Oh, General Mitterick's probably gonna think that I didn't charge." And then so a horseman comes pounding over to where they're at, and he asks them, "Is General Mitterick here?" Tunney says, "No, don't know where he is." And then Valamir kind of interrupts and goes, "What's the matter? What's going on?" And then the messenger goes, "Sir, Lord Marshal Croy orders all hostilities to cease at once." And he smiles and he goes, "We've made peace with the Northmen." And then he turns and goes away, and everyone's like, "Peace? And then Valamir's like, "Fuck." And then it's funny that Tunney puts away his sword too, and he starts putting away the standard, and he didn't feel as strongly as Valamir felt, but he did feel a little bit disappointed about the way things had turned out so far. It's like, and then I like how Sergeant Forrest walks up to Tunney and he goes, "Wow, that was some standard bearing. Hey, Corporal, up front leading the men in the place of most danger, most glory. Forward!" cried brave Corporal Tunney, hurling his courage in the teeth of the enemy. He's like,
he just goes, "Fuck yourself, Forrest."
I do think it's pretty cool how Forrest is like taunting him, but like Forrest is doing the taunting thing where he's like, it's like kind of a compliment at the same time. Like, I knew you had it in you, and that's really why Tunney's like, fuck you, because he's like, you don't know me. Get out of my head.
Yeah. So then we switch perspectives over to Calder, and he just was so grateful to be alive, exhausted and muddy, but alive. You know, he can't believe he did it. You know, was able to. You know, Midoric obviously did the insane thing, which is charged without checking the ground or waiting for the light, and doomed his cavalry. And then Crazy Look, that broad 10 ways of all people, actually came to help out Calder. And you know, because he's thinking about like how Dow had told him, you know, deal with them, and Calder found a way. So, you know, he was super excited, and just like he wishes Scale could have been here, it was alive to see this.
Which is interesting. He says that.
Yeah, yeah, but problem. Calder stops walking when he gets to his men, and he sees that Pale Snow's with over there, but also a good score of Dow's Carl's. And who else but Carl Shivers, his one eye fixed on Calder. And he's like, Calder's thinking to himself, like, there's no reason for them to be here unless Kerndon Craw had done what he said he was going to do and tell Black Dow the truth. And Kerndon Craw was a man that is famous for always doing what he said he was going to do. Calder's like, man, that's maybe it might have been a dumb decision that I made back then, huh? Yeah. And then Shivers, he goes, Prince Calder, and he walks towards him, and he's like, fuck, there's no way, it's too late to run, right? It's not like I can do anything. They're just gonna chase me down. And you know, you have to be realistic, as the Bloody Nine had been so bloody fond of saying. And Calder, you know, he just smiled, and he's like, what's up? And then Shivers, you know, he looms closer and closer and closer, and then he just goes, Dow wants you.
Dow wants you.
And
that's a great bit of Joe repetition there.
Yeah, because
he said that so many times.
Chapter, yep. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, the last line of the chapter is luck. Some men have it, some don't. That's the end of that chapter. Boys, how do you rate it?
I like this. I love the fact that Tunney's entire arc for this book is that they went through the swamp, and then they sat on the hill, and that's it. That's all they did. I think that is such a brilliant fucking anticlimactic, but it pays off, and it's somehow satisfying at the same time. Obviously, the Calder bit is a lot shorter as well, but I'd say I'm going to give this one a 5, despite being quite short.
Okay. Harrison?
I really like the same bit with Tunney being up on the hill. I'm just waiting because it shows a different aspect of war that the heroes does, which is doing fucking nothing, which is essentially what they do. And I like how we get this characterization of Tunney that, like, yeah, he's a scoundrel and all this stuff, but like he's also he's there when you need him. He takes pride in his job. He understands how it goes. He's like one of those corporate guys who's like in middle management who doesn't seem like to give a shit, but then when you really need them, they pull through. I like that a lot. It adds something, like Joe does this a lot. He has his character. You think you understand how they are, and then he adds another layer to it closer to the end of the story. And I think that does well. So I think I'm gonna give this a 6 and a knuckle, I think.
Okay. I like the chapter, you know, short, sure, but it's good. I enjoyed it. The thing you just talked about, Harrison, was like doing fucking nothing in war, right? Was you know, he referenced it too, where it's like, you know, in the beginning of the chapter, he goes that you know, to this day was one of his worst ever, because it actually combined the two awful constants of army life, which is terror and tedium. So I thought that's exactly what you're talking about, you know.
Yep.
Yeah, we get Tunney like morphed before our very eyes into a bloodthirsty psychopath that is in love with a piece of cloth, Can you imagine if Calder would have stolen the first standard? I think Tunney might have snapped.
Well, Tony's
Yeah.
not shooting enough to leave his standard out in the front.
I bet you he would have.
Yes, exactly right.
I bet you he would have thrown bags of worth shit at the Northmen. I know that for a fact.
Yeah, he's like he suddenly becomes like like he's not really a fighter, but somebody takes the standard, suddenly he's
Like,
he's
that name's
blocked in his
crazy.
prime.
if Kliege, if he had the first standard in his backpack, Tunney would have jumped in that goddamn bog and saved him.
I think he would have actually, yes.
He absolutely.
But because
would
he only had liquor, you know, it's just an item.
Yeah.
The banner is his duty.
Yeah, and then the fleeting happiness that Calder has before he gets snatched away before his very eyes in the form of shivers. That's always great. So yeah, I'll give this a 5 and a knuckle. Give this a 5 and a knuckle. We'll move on to our next segment, which is our community interactions segment. Boys, what are we going to highlight?
Well, for those who don't know, we've mentioned the Devils last time because of the art, but we're going to mention the Devils again, but kind of for a different reason. Joe is doing a book tour, not only of the UK, but he's doing a book tour of the US, which is a big deal because there's a lot of us readers out here. In fact, I believe the majority of you all are Americans. And so, if you do have a chance to go online and try to get some tickets, if you haven't heard about it, I would recommend that right away to go out there and try to get a book signing, or it seems to be that different locations have different events. And we are all going to be going to see him, of course, and hoping that he knows who we are.
Yes.
Probably
yes.
not.
Yes, we will be. The three of us are going to be at the book signing at different locations, obviously. I will be showing my fat face in New York City. So
Hairy face, Jeffrey. Hairy face.
Well,
You
thank
don't
you.
have a fat face.
Well, thank you. But we'll be there in New York City. So if you want to see me,
Obviously, Joe's the main attraction, but if you want to see us as
I
well,
mean,
we'll be there
debatable,
too.
but
Not
whatever.
You know what, Jeffrey, you're the one with high enough confidence to turn it into something about us. You know, I did not
I
even
could.
consider that.
Yeah, I would. But
We're just gonna pull up a chair next to Joe and sit down.
I'm just gonna take the microphone.
We're
From the,
equivalent.
I'm gonna take the microphone from the host and be like, "All right, so now we'll get this event started."
Oh.
Without us, Joe wouldn't have such widespread popularity.
Right? We think it's gonna be a great running gag if we can get everybody to go to Joe when he signs your books, and if you're gonna go and just say, "Have you heard of the Circle of the World podcast?" Or "Have you heard of a podcast solely focused on the first law? Have you heard about this, Joe? Have you heard? We're gonna drive him nuts. He's gonna cancel the rest of his book tour.
By the time he gets to me and the Bloody Niner in Austin, he's probably going to just snap. He won't be able to handle it anymore.
You might have.
Not enough of you people.
He might hire armed security, to be honest.
You fucking nerds.
I never asked to have a podcast. I was happy having just my books. Anyways.
So yeah, we're very much looking forward to that.
Yeah. So yeah, people, if you're in the, just go look at the website, his website. He has the locations there, right, George?
Yep, it's just on his Twitter as well.
Mm-hmm.
For both the US and the UK locations. I think a couple of them have already sold out. So, and then a few more will be sold out by the time this episode goes out as well. So.
Oh yeah, probably most likely. So.
Get in there quick and book it up, and you get a free copy of the book as well, The Devils, for signing. So
yeah, absolutely. So make sure go to that website, sign up, buy your tickets, and then maybe we'll run into each other. Who knows? If you see a short, hairy man in New York City, that's gonna be me. I don't know if I make up a large part of the population, like my people, but whatever.
Don't worry, our agents will be moving throughout the crowd saying, "Have you heard of the Circle of the World?"
Have you heard of the Circle?
Don't do that.
Have you heard of the Circle of the World podcast? So anyway, and then go ahead.
Go ahead, sorry, you.
I was just gonna say, and also talk. Don't forget about memeing every chapter. Reddit.
Yes.
Don't forget about that, folks. Go to the House of the Meme Maker subreddit and submit your memes on a daily basis or weekly basis, however you prefer. And we shall choose the best one of the week.
Absolutely. And just another thing as well, we do often say to leave a comment on the episodes on Spotify, which is great because I think the Bloody Diner here has just left a comment that just says a comment. Which is great. Thank you very much.
He is a sassy
sarcastic bastard. Yeah.
When did he leave that comment?
That was on episode 133, so it was 2 weeks ago. I've just seen it now.
Okay, Bloody Niner, I see you.
Which is great. Thanks for that. Nobody ever leaves comments, so it's good.
Yeah. No, thank you for that so much. Yeah. Love that. We want more comments, folks. Don't make me have to do polls and shit. I don't want to have to do that. God,
What?
we need.
You never did.
Well, shut up, Harrison. All right. Well, we'll move on to our next segment, which is our second chapter read through, and this one is spoils, and this one is through the eyes of our favorite incel, I guess, Gorst. Him and Finnery get to Ostrong. If we remember, at the end of the last chapter we were with them, Ostrong had went up kablooey, thanks to Ishri. Thanks, with her propensity to just blow.
Who still
shit
has
up.
it, by the way?
Yeah, she still got it. Like I said, we probably heard the wind carry the words, "I still got it." So they make it to Ostrong. They get off horseback, and it's chaos there, right? Obviously, after an explosion. And so they start, looking through all the debris, overturned, pieces of wood, doors, shattered, all that jazz. There's corpses here and there. And Finnery is frantically searching for Hal, her husband, and Gorst is searching too. But his motives are a little
Less
different.
frantically.
Well, no, he says he's searching even more ardently than her, but for not good reasons. He's hoping to find this fucking guy dead, because he thinks that she's dead, she's automatically gonna suck his dick. Like, what the fuck is going on here?
Yeah. If we haven't talked about it before, he's obviously he's one of those nice guys.
No, we called him he's an incel. He's absolutely an incel.
He is.
I think this is probably the worst thing that he does is this attitude here where he's like, "Oh, I hope he's dead." Like, I think this is terrible.
Except for the fact that George, the worst thing he does, he's like this all the time.
He is like this all the time. He very much is.
Yeah, but in Joe fashion, this could be the moment where he kind of changes a little bit, like some characters do. Your characters that start out awful, or we think they're awful, sometimes get there a little bit of redemption, but no,
No. He's out here.
He's just an ass.
And his internal monologue, he keeps harping about Cardati's House of Leisure and how he just doesn't have the things he deserves. Like, he's just not where he should be. He's not where he wants to be. Life's so unfair. Oh, I'm sorry. Life's so unfair. Oh my God! Again, I did the
homie.
Mickey!
Man, that is just Marge Simpson. Seriously, it's brilliant.
The Hero, starring
Homer.
Starring.
Oh my God.
So anyway, as he's looking around, and he finally comes upon Brock. He lifts up a door, and Brock was laying under it, and he doesn't look like he's that injured, but he does have some blood streaked on his face or whatever. But he sees him, and he's just like, well, here is Brock. And Finnery's looking around, so she's not next to him, right? So he puts his hand down to
caress his sweet, sweet, beautiful face. And he reaches down, he goes, "I've loved you always, Hal," and goes boop, right on his nose.
If only. So he puts his hand on his neck, and he squeezes. A little squeeze. Just a little tiny firm squeeze. And then he's like, "What's the difference? Kill a few hundred men, that are Northmen, and one little man that's in the same uniform as me. Is it really that different?" So he squeezes a little
What's
harder.
kind of fucked up is he's not necessarily wrong.
Exactly. I think Joe's trying to make the point here that, is it really that different? If you go to war and killing people than killing someone in cold blood.
Right. True, but Gorse is a dick. I mean, he's like, you're gonna try to kill.
Not saying he's right.
I'm just saying, like, the fuck, like, he's not like. In what fucking world does it make sense that Fenrir gonna suck his dick, give him the blowjob that we've been denying him, and we denied everyone last week? Like, it doesn't make sense.
It's now the real question is he doing? Here's a thought. Is he thinking about killing Hal because he has the excuse that he's likes this girl and that he'll get something out of it? Or is it the inverse? Is he actually doing it to get rid of him so that he can be with Fenrir? I think it's he doesn't really know which one it is. Ooh, an excuse to kill somebody? Yeah. I want to get with this girl. She'll suck my dick. It'll be great. And I get to kill someone.
Well, yeah, I mean, he states in his mind, in his internal monologue, that if he takes Hal out of the picture, then they can be together finally. If like they should have been if he had ever had the courage to ask her out, in the previous year, which is like goofball.
I just mean he's obsessed with killing, so
killing and her, so
yeah, that's true.
And then he's squeezing, like I said, squeezing a little harder, impatient to be done. And then we hear, "Have you found anything?" And Fenrir was walking over to him. So now his hand just switches from a chokehold to now like he has two fingers on his neck. It's like, oh, he's feeling his pulse. Oh, he's alive still. Fenrir's like, oh my god. And then Gorse, he picks up Brock. They get to the surgeon's tent, lays him down. And Fenrir's just watching Hal with hope, fear, and love, and just holding his hand. And Gorse is like, all right. So, he leaves the tent and he stands like guard, I guess. He stands there for a while, doesn't know how long. But then Fenrir comes out and says that they say he's not too badly hurt. And I like how Gorse says,
"I'm glad."
There you go. But there's an ellipsis here, which I find hilarious. He must have been like, "I am so glad."
Yeah. So funny. I like how Fenrir's like, yeah, it's just a basic luck, isn't it? It's like, yeah.
He says, too true.
Too true.
And then she goes, "I don't know how I could ever repay you." And then he just says, "It's nothing." And then, but at that point, she already turned around, went back into the tent. And so he's like, okay, now I'm alone again. So then he starts, and he walks back towards Ostrong. And then somebody else is like, over here, help. Somebody's like stuck under a big piece of, like a big wooden beam. And Gorse, he goes over, he lifts the wooden beam off the guy, and he carries him too, and he takes him back to the tent. And the guy is, so relieved that he kind of just, he just says, "Thank you. You're a hero." And then Gorse thinks, he didn't say anything. He just thinks, if only you knew, my friend. If only you knew. And that's the end of that chapter. Boys, how do you rate it?
I like that. That's one of the very many clever ways that Joe uses the word heroes in this book, the heroes. Almost every single time somebody says the word hero, it's just not true at all.
Right.
And I think that is brilliant. Harrison, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I'll go first. I as you know, I'm not a big fan of Gorst, but as well reading is this, he's got one of the only inner monologues that we directly see in a cohesive way throughout the whole story. And the only other person that is equivalent to that is Glokta. And Glokta is utterly self-loathing, and so is Gorst. They have similarities in certain ways. Whereas Glokta ultimately does want to have... he has like a kind of purpose in life. He has some goals. He has some morals, even if they're a bit hazy, even though he's a bit gray. Gorst does not. Gorse is self-aware and is like all for being a complete asshole. If he didn't get caught, he would
would've done it.
absolutely. And he also is a complete utter pussy, because if he really was like, I am gonna become awesome and glorious, then he would have joined the Northmen right then and there earlier, I think. And he is somehow simultaneously a utter sociopathic killing machine, who is completely unaware how other people work, while being simultaneously completely aware of how he works, but unwilling to actually live up to his full potential because he doesn't know any better, and he's too caught up throwing a pity party. And it's really, really, really well done, and a lot of people love Gorse for this reason. I think this is kind of like his peak chapter, so I think I'm going to give this one, because you kind of guess this whole time, like, is Gorse really that bad? Oh no, he's bad. I want to give this one a 7. I'm going to give this one a 7 and a knuckle, because I think it's his epitome chapter, and we don't really do it justice here. Epitome. Thank you. We don't really do it justice here, but Gorse's inner monologue is really, really brilliant, and we do recommend you just listening is preferable to Pacey's inner monologue of Gorse throughout the book. So, anyways, that's what I have to say about that one.
I think I'm going to give it the exact same score. I'm going to give it a 7 as well. Like you said, Harrison, like there could be some holdouts here that are like, oh, maybe Gorse is going to be redeemed, or is he going to, he's going to be a good guy in the end. It's like the second he like starts to think he's going to kill Hal, you're just like, oh, shit. No, this guy is he's too far gone. He's just gone.
He has no regrets.
Yeah, I'm gonna give it a try. Let's make it a trifecta. I'll give it a 7 out of 9 fingers. It's a short chapter, but like you said, like the real thing is like, oh shit, are we at the watershed moment where the point of no return? He would have fucking killed Hal if Finree didn't walk up on him so quickly. That's crazy. Fuck.
If he didn't hesitate, if he just kind of fucking killed him immediately.
Yo, that's crazy. Fucking cells. And fuck Gorse. But I'm glad, Hal is alive and it will be just fine, it looks like. So, fuck that. But 7 out of 9 fingers for me. Well, now we'll move on to our next segment, which is Best Meme of the Week. Georgia Boy, that's you. Take it away.
So, this week we have user on Reddit, Fringe Marsh. It's a good name. And it's the shocked Pikachu meme, which is one of my favorite memes ever. And it's the bit where Wirren finds out the origin of his true name. Like, that's not why they call you Cracknut. They call you Cracknut because it's widely assumed your nut is cracked, and it's the shocked Pikachu face. Absolutely perfect. I can picture him doing that. Exactly that.
That is great. And I think we just talked about that too on the podcast a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
I feel like.
Yeah, that's a very topical one.
Oh, it was good.
And this is another one, but this could have been in the Beaming Every Chapter, but he decided just not to enter it for some reason.
He just posted it?
Just posted it.
Love it. Fuck it.
Yeah, it's good. It's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that, Fringe Marsh.
Fringe Marsh?
Fringe Marsh, like a bog, a marsh.
Fringe Marsh, gotcha.
Marsh.
All right, cool. Well, thank you for that, Fringe Marsh. We appreciate you, and yeah, please continue to keep posting your memes on Reddit where we can't log in because whatever. So we're just waiting for the time to pass, and then we will attempt to rejoin after our exile. So we shall see. But continue posting them, please. Thank you.
Yep. Well, there would be no meme of the week segment if you guys don't post the memes. So, come on.
So we'll move on to our third chapter read through, which is Desperate Measures. So we're here from the perspective of Beck at first, and he's thinking about because they're at the fires now, right? Everyone has their fires. And the Union will probably have one way of looking at it, but Dow is calling this a victory for the North. and everyone was, inclined to agree. And and everyone's talking about new song. They're talking about the deeds of the named men, and they're singing old songs, but also coming up with new songs, and singing about Black Dow and Call Ricci and Ironhead, Ten Ways, Golden. Talks about even words like in the Bloody Nine, Betha, Three Trees, Little Bones, Scarling, Hoodless, even are sinking into the past. You don't even hear much about Wearin' of Bleh, even, or Shama Heartless, not even a peep. And then Crawl sits down next to Beck, and Beck asks how's his head and everything. Is like, listen, sore, but I've had worse, and I almost could have had a lot worse. Scory told me that you're the one that saved my life. So thank you. He thanks Beck, and he's like, I'm just trying to do the right thing, like you said. And he goes, wow, someone's listening. Gives him a drink, and then he tells him that that Beck did good, that it was Beck that put down Gorst. What?
Yeah, does that mean that it's fucking Beck that knocked Gorst on the back of the head?
Yeah, clearly.
That's fucking awesome.
Yeah,
well done.
We talked about this. We talked about this last week.
Did we?
Yeah, he hits him with a plat of the sword. Although, I mean, I don't want to. You may have been
amazed. I'm just finding
distracted.
Great.
You were hammered, George. In your defense, you were hammered.
Yes, listeners. If you couldn't tell, last week I was blackout drunk. So
yeah. So, and then he
I edited as well. I don't know how I don't know that.
And so then Beck asked Craw if he killed Gorst, and he goes, no, he's still alive. And he goes, all right, so I didn't kill no one today. And he wasn't sure if he should be disappointed by that or happy. He just didn't feel really any other way. And he says that he killed a man yesterday. And then, Craw goes, huh, Flood said you killed 4. And Beck starts like, I don't know. He had a little bit of beer. He's like, fuck it, I'm going to be honest. And he goes, and the Flood got it wrong, and I was too much of a coward to put him right. It was someone called Reft that killed those men. I hid in a cupboard while they were fighting. Hid in a cupboard and pissed my pants. There's Red Beck for you. And Craw wasn't bothered or even surprised. He was like, well, it doesn't change what you did today. There's far worse that a man can do in a battle than hide in a cupboard. And then Beck goes, yep, I know. And then he's like, Chief, there's something I gotta tell you. And Crawl goes, I'm listening. But at that moment, they were interrupted by the men bringing Calder over to Dow and dumping him right in front of Dow. And Dow's just sitting on Scarling's chair, and he's just like, well, if it isn't Prince Calder.
I love this fucking villain intro.
Mm-hmm.
My arch nemesis.
I like a good well, who doesn't?
Yeah, I love it too. And so we switch perspectives to Calder now. And Calder, he's trying to make the best of a shitty situation. He's trying to look as comfortable as he could on his knees, not a blowjob. And then...
I never realized how many times Joe uses on their knees in this book until Jeff started doing this last chapter. Apparently, it's a lot.
It's a lot. And so, you have all the named men around. And then, Dow goes, can you guess why I invited you here? And Calder is like, I have an inkling. Then Dow goes, well, for anyone who doesn't have an inkling, Calder here tried to convince my new second to kill me. Ain't that right, Craw? And Craw just looks at the ground. He's like, that's right. And so he goes, are you going to deny it, Calder? And Calder says, if I did, could we forget the whole thing? Funny. And then Dow's like, still joking. I like that. Not that the faithlessness surprises me, because Calder is known for being a schemer. The stupidity does, though. Kerndon Craw's a straight edge. Everyone knows that. Stabbing men in the back ain't his style. And then Calder says, I'll admit it wasn't my brightest moment. How about we chalk it up to youthful folly and let it slide?
I love Calder's little attitude here. He's just so fucking
like
almost flippant, but I love him.
Yeah, and then Dao, he goes, "Don't see how I can. You push my patience too far, and it's got a spike at the end." And he goes, "Haven't I treated you like a son? Not a favorite son, more like running the litter. But didn't I give you, let you have your say around the fire? And when you said too much, didn't I send you to Carleon with your wife to cool your head rather than just cut your head off and worry about the details afterwards?" He goes, "Your father wasn't so forgiving to those who disagreed with him, as I recall." And Calder goes, "True. You've been generosity itself, except for trying to kill me, of course." And Dao goes, "Huh?" and and then Calder goes, "4 nights ago at Call Ricci's weapon take. Bringing anything back? 3 men tried to murder me, and when I put one to the question, he dropped Broad Tenway's name, and everyone knows Broad Tenways wouldn't do a thing without your say-so. Are you denying it?" And then Dao goes, "I am, in fact." He looks at Tenways, and Tenways just shakes his head. And he goes, "And Tenways too. Maybe he's lying. He might have his own reasons, but I can tell you one thing for a fact. Any man here can tell you I had no part in it." And Calder's like, "How's that?" And then Dao goes, "Because you're still fucking breathing. If I had in mind to kill you, do you think there's a man that could stop me?" And then Calder goes, "Huh."
That is a very good point.
Yeah, it's a very, very good point. And he looks for Ricci because Ricci's the one that told him that Dao wants him dead, and he's just looking somewhere else, determinedly trying to look anywhere else.
I love he just I love how Joe is able to use like these moments that seem so like cliche in such a perfect way, because cliche moments are cliche for a reason. Like the fact that he looks over at him and he's like looking away, like he's like something like whoopsie, like looking away, he's gonna avert. It's so dumb. Oh, it's hilarious.
Someone as smart as Calder is, he dumb. If Dao wouldn't have gone through all this, right? He would have just killed Calder. This is Dao.
He wouldn't have had to try subterfuge or anything. He'd have just gone, right, everybody, we're killing him. And everybody would be like, okay.
Yeah. All right, cool. We got it. No, and then Dao goes, "Look, it doesn't matter who didn't die yesterday. I can tell you who'll die tomorrow." And he let the silence stretch out, and then he goes, "You." I imagine he might. I wish he would have done it. Like sing-songy. Guess who? It's gonna be you.
says it with a Styrian accent.
Yeah. It's gonna be you.
Hey.
And says that everyone seems to be smiling except Calder, Craw, and maybe Shivers, but that's probably because his face is so scarred he couldn't get his mouth to smile. And Dao asks aloud if anyone has any objections, anyone wants to stand up and speak for Calder. No one does. And because Calder is like, fuck all his whispers and his seeds, how silly and fruitless they all are. And Dao goes, "No anyone here is not happy about this." And then Calder says, "I'm not fucking delighted." And Dao laughs. He's like, you got balls, whatever they say. You got bones of a rare kind. He says he'll miss him. And then he asks if he has a preference when it comes to like method of death. You could hang him, cut your head off, or the bloody cross, though he wouldn't advise it. And then Calder just got, I don't know, all the fighting today maybe went to his head, but he didn't do much fighting. He goes, "Fuck yourself. I'd rather die with the sword in my hand. You and me, Black Dao, in the circle, a challenge." And it's a long silence, and Dao's like, "Challenge."
I like the way Stephen Pacey says this as well in the book. He's like, "Challenge."
And it's like, over what? And Dao has a point. He's like, you make a challenge to decide an issue. There's no issue here. Is you turned on your chief and you tried to convince his second to stabbing him in the back. That's not a fucking challenge. Would your father have taken a challenge? And he goes, "You're not my father. You're not a fucking shadow of him. He made that chain you're wearing, forged it link by link like he forged the North new. You stole it from the Bloody Nine, and you had to stab him in the back to get it. All you are, Black Dao, is a thief and a coward and an oath breaker and a fucking idiot besides." And it's like, whoa. Whoa.
Where's all this bravery coming from?
Yeah. And
I love that, like, everything that Calder says is, like, true. But because it's blacked out, he's like none of that even matters to him. He's just, like, focused in the moment. Like, oh, okay, Calder, this is what you're really trying to do is be strong and brave now. And then he just immediately sees right through it. Some people would be like, like they start to argue with him, but Blacked Out knows not to argue with Calder. It's pointless. He just cuts right to the chase.
Mm-hmm. And Dow tries to smile as well, and he was like, "Huh, is that a fact?" And then, but Calder is like, he's doing this because it's like, having a beaten man fling shit at him, is souring his victory, right? His day of like, yay. And so he goes, "Haven't you got the bones to face me man to man?" And Dow goes, "Show me a man, and we'll see." And then he, makes a joke about. He makes a joke. I was man enough for Tenway's daughter. And he goes, "Oh, but what?" He like points at Shivers. He's like, "You got harder men now to do your black work. Lost your taste for it. Come on, fight me. The circle." And then Dow had no reason to say yes. No real reason. It didn't matter, right? But sometimes it's all about more how it looks than it is. This is a challenge to everything that Dow was in front of all the great men of the North. He couldn't really turn it down, actually. So he is, all right, you want it the hard way, you can have it the fucking hard way. Tomorrow at dawn, and no pissing about with spinning the shield and choosing weapons. Me and you, sword each, to the death. Take this bastard somewhere I don't have to see him smirk. And then, Calder, Shivers takes, Calder away, passes by Craw, and Craw, tells him, like, "I told you to run." And Calder goes, "Well, I told you not to say anything." Seems like neither of us can do as we're told. And then Calder says, "I'm sorry it had to be this way." And then Calder says it didn't have to be this way. And Crawl's like, "You're right. I'm sorry. That's what he chose. He's sorry that he chose that." And then, Calder says, "Look, don't be. You're straight edge. Everyone knows it. And let's face the facts. I've been hurtling towards the grave ever since my dad died. So just a surprise that it took this long. Who knows? Maybe I'll beat down the circle," as Shivers leads him away. And Craw's face kind of told Calder that, "Yeah, I didn't think that's likely." And he goes, again, "Calder was the biggest coward and piss poorest fighter in any given company. Black Dow was the very opposite, and they hadn't earned their reputations by accident. He had about as much chance in the circle as a side of ham, and everyone knew it." And that's the end of that chapter. Boys, how do you rate it?
How do you rate it, Jeffrey?
Love it. Again, short chapters, in this episode, but love it. Because it's like the hubris of Calder. Again, how could you not clearly see that Dowd had no desire to really kill him, right? For all his scheming. Now, maybe that doesn't change anything. Maybe if say that night ever happened, right? Let's say that night where those guys tried to kill Calder never happened. Mm-hmm. Calder's probably still gonna scheme. Probably gonna try to still scheme because he wants the throne. He wants to be the leader of men. Is convincing men to follow him. So he probably still would have done it anyway, but he just didn't have a moral leg to stand on, or at least what he thought he had, right? Yeah. I didn't like my poor baby Dow having his day victory ruined. I don't like that. Love Dow. And I wish he would have just killed Calder right then and there. Fuck him. Fuck that. But it's a great chapter. Love it. 7 out of 9 fingers.
Yeah, I'm going to go one lower. I always love seeing Dow. I like that Beck doesn't fully manage to get his confession out to Craw. Even though that's really, really, really wants. I'd like to see how Craw would have reacted in that moment to that information. But Joe loves to tease us, doesn't he? But yeah, like you said, short chapter, but a good one. 6.
Harrison?
Yeah, I'm gonna go 6 and a knuckle. I like this chapter for the same reason you guys do. It seems like a little bit inevitable, but it is interesting to see, like, we're seeing more of the truth coming out, that maybe Black Dow wasn't scheming this whole time. Maybe there's something else going on. And I like, I like how we seeing, like, Calder is basically, yeah, everything was going well. Now we're seeing him having to deal with all this stuff, and for all of his words and all his cleverness, it like really doesn't mean much when it comes to somebody like Black Now, who is already in charge and sees right through his stuff. So I think it plays out really well. But also, it's kind of not that this is bad, very predictable. There's really no other way for this to play out. So, yeah, 6 and a knuckle, I think.
6 and a knuckle. Cool. See that you guys are Dow haters. Cool, not a problem. But so we'll move on to our next chapter read through. And this one is Stuff Happens. It's a final chapter for this episode. Pretty short one. We are in the perspective of Corporal Tunney. And he's at the tent where Lord Marshal Croy and General Mitterick are in, but he's not in there. He's outside. A guard isn't letting him in, even though Tunney has a letter for him to read for General Mitterick. So he has to wait. He's like, cool. So he literally just goes, fuck it, I'm waiting here. So he waits with the guard, and he can hear the conversation that's going on inside, right? It's between Mitterick and Croy, and Mitterick is pissed. He goes, we forced them back. They're teetering, exhausted. They have no stomach left for it. The slightest push now, I have them just where I want them. And then Croy goes, well, you thought you had them there yesterday, and it turned out they had you. And the Northmen aren't the only ones who've run out of stomach. Mitterick counters by saying that his men deserve the chance to finish what they started. He deserves and then Croy interrupts and says, no. And then Mitterick says, then, sir, I demand the right to resign. And Croy interrupts and says, no to that either. No, even more to that. and then Mitterick tries to say something, and Croy speaks over and goes, no, like, must you argue every damn point? You will swallow your pride and do your duty. You will stand down, you will bring your men back across the bridge, and you will prepare your division for the journey south to Ufrith as soon as we have completed negotiations. Do you understand me, General? Then there's like a long pause, and Mitterick just says, we lost. We lost. And Croy goes, we drew. Sometimes that's the most one can hope for, the irony of the soldier's profession. And he goes, war can only ever pave the way for peace, and it should be no other way. And then he tells Mitterick, he used to be like him. He says that he thought that there was but one right thing to do. One day, probably very soon, you will replace me, and you will learn the world is otherwise. And then Mitterick goes, replace you? And Croy says that he suspects that the great architect has tired of this particular mason. General Jallenhorn died at the Heroes, and that Mitterick is the only reasonable choice. One that Croy supports in any case, which is like, wow, that's nice. And then Mitterick says that he is speechless. And he goes, look, if I had known, Croy says if he had known he could achieve that simply by resigning, he would have done it years ago. And then Mitterick says, I would like Opker promoted to lead my division. No objection there. And then he goes for General Jallenhorn. He thinks, and then Croy interrupts him and says, Colonel Felnig has been given the command. General Felnig, he should say. And now Mitterick is like, General Felnig? And he's like, and Croy says, yeah, he has the seniority, and his recommendations to the king, have already been sent. And then Mitterick says, I simply cannot work with that man. And Croy says, you can and you will. Felnig is sharp and cautious, and he will balance you out as you have balanced me. Then he says, though you were often, frankly, a pain in my ass, by and large, it has been an honor. And then Tunney could tell that there was like a clicking of the heels together as Croy saluted Mitterick. And then Mitterick salutes him back. He says, Lord Marshal Croy, the honor has been entirely mine. And the two of them, they leave the tent. They pass, past the guards. Croy, he walks, he walks away, but Mitterick stands there, and he just Mitterick is just staring, after Croy. And then Tunney goes, General Mitterick, sir. And then Mitterick turns, and he's like very obviously wiping away a tear while pretending to be clearing dust from his eye, which is like, oh, fucking love Lord Marshal Croy. Fucking love these moments when men that were dicks, come around. Like, remember when Croy had his moment when he saw Polder dead? Even before that, when they shook hands, because the Battle of Adua. Sorry, we could fucking fight, bitch. Sorry. I love these kind of moments. And then he goes, Corporal Tunney, standard bearer of His Majesty's 1st Regiment. And then Mitterick frowns. He goes, wait a minute. The same Tunney who was made color sergeant after Oriok? Tunney puffs out his chest. The very same, sir. And he goes, the same Tunney who was demoted after Dunbreck? And his shoulders slumped. The same, sir. And then he goes, the same Tunney who was court-martialed after that business at Shrikta? The same, sir. Although I will hasten to point out that the tribunal found no evidence of wrongdoing, sir. Oh my God. And then he goes, so much for tribunals. What brings you here, Tunney? And he goes, I have in my official capacity as standard bearer a letter from my commanding officer, Valamir. And Mitterick's like, what does it say? And he goes, I don't know. He goes, please, the kind of person you are, I bet you already know a good idea of its contents. What does it say? So he goes, all right, well, he lays out some reason, at some length, of reasons behind his failure to attack. He apologizes most profusely to you, to Marshal Croy, to His Majesty, and to the people of the Union, and he offers his immediate resignation, but also demands the right to explain himself before a court-martial. He was rather vague on that point. He goes on to praise the men and to shoulder the blame entirely himself, and then Mitterick just takes the letter, crumples it, and then throws it into a puddle. And he says, tell Colonel Valamir not to worry. It's a battle. We all made mistakes. Would it be pointless, Corporal Tunney, to tell you to stay out of trouble? I like how Tunney says, all advice gratefully considered, sir. And then he goes, what if I made it in order? And he goes, all orders considered too, sir. He's like, all right, dismissed. So, Tunney, walks away. And he's heading back to, his tent. He wants to drink. He wants to sleep. He's excited about, post-battle because these are good times for someone like Tunney where, you could make a good profit, in terms of, selling stuff and what have you. And then he comes across a group of 2 men standing in barley. One of them saying, I didn't know. I just didn't see him. And then one of them, the one that was saying all that, was the nervous-looking. He was a nervous-looking young lad that Tunney didn't recognize. He was holding an empty flatbow, and it was a new recruit possibly. And the other person was Yoke, torch in one hand, and he's obviously very upset with his new recruit. And he goes, Tunney goes, "What's going on?" And then he goes, "Oh no!" When he got closer, he saw that it's Worth laying in a bald patch of earth, his eyes open, tongue hanging out, flatbow bolt right through his breastbone. The recruit said, was like, "I thought it was Northmen." And then Yoke is like, "The Northmen are on the north side of the lines, you fucking idiot." And he goes, "I thought he had an axe." And then Tunney grabs what he had, and it was a shovel. He says, "I reckon he'd been off doing what he did best," which is taking a massive shit. And Yoke, he's like, "I should," he's going to try to kill the fucking guy. He goes for his sword, and then Tunney steps between them. He goes, "Look, leave it. It's a battle. We all made mistakes. I'll go to Sergeant Forrest, see what has to be done." And then he takes the flatbow from the recruit and gives the shovel to the guy. And he says, "In the meantime, you better get digging. For Worth, the northern dirt would have to do." And that's the end of that chapter. Boys, how would you rate it?
I love the interaction, like you said earlier, Jeff, between Roy and Mitterick. Mm-hmm. I like the kind of soften up a bit there, and the fact that Mitterick is aware of who Tunney is and kind of ribs him a little bit. I think that's pretty funny, just considering the circumstances. Mm-hmm. And we're going to talk about Worth in a minute, but yeah, that's pretty sad, isn't it?
Yeah.
Poor Tunney having lost 3 out of 4 of his recruits.
So far.
So far.
So far. We wonder what happens to Yoke now. Ding, ding, ding. But go ahead, Harrison.
Oh, sorry. I just say I'm going to give this one.
Sorry.
I don't quite like this one as much as the other 3 in this episode, so I'm going to give this one a 4 and a knuckle.
Okay. Harrison?
I feel similar to you. I do like this beginning part with Troy, how he's like trying to transfer command, and he's like getting ready, and he's like preparing his men and all that. I do think it's funny and kind of tragic too. Like in Croy's mind, he's like, yes, no. Miderick and Feldnik work good together, just like how in his mind, similar to how him and Polder, they sharpen each other. I think that's kind of what he's thinking, or maybe he's thinking like me and Feldnik, but he's mistaking that, and he's not realizing that that's different than what he is currently dealing with right there, which is more of a Polder Korsich situation, and he's not really realizing that it's not just Feldnik's going to make him sharper; they're just going to become adversaries. I don't mean that Croy is unwise. I just think maybe he doesn't know these gentlemen as well as he thinks he does. But either way, I do like this beginning part, but I think I'm going to give this a 4 and a knuckle. It's still kind of funny, but honestly, at this point, it's kind of like we feel like Tunney with the book, and not that this is bad, but we're kind of tired. We're just like, oh. We're just like, this is tragic.
Tragic. Well, I'm going to give it I like it, but it's so short. Poor Worth dying, like you said, we'll talk about that in a minute, George. Maybe I'll give it a 4 and a knuckle. I feel like, that feels good to me, I guess. I think to counter your point, Harrison, I think it's not. I don't see Croy being like wrong about this. I think he's looking at it from the perspective of like, well, Croy was the Lord Marshal, Miderick was a subordinate, right? Miderick is very similar to Polder in all sense, so that's what he means by balancing out. So it's like they might have had an adversarial relationship. They might not have had like a warm relationship, but it might have been something where it's like, Croy, even to his day, even though he might have changed and become better at some things, he's still impeccably dressed. Everything is down to the right to finest detail, that kind of thing. So Miderick being kind of the opposite in that sense is the balance. That's what he's saying. That Feldnik is similar to Croy. He comes from that that cloth, but now that the Lord Marshal is going to be Miderick, who's more about the flamboyance, the vim and vigor and all that jazz, that Feldnik is going to act as a balance, because Feldnik is going to be, he's still going to be subordinate like he was before, but it's, I think that's what he meant by that. And I did like how...
That's a good point. I see what you're saying.
Yeah, and I do like the instant almost ramifications of that kind of conversation with Croy, because, like Miderick might have... If he didn't have that conversation with Croy, might have snapped at Tunney or might have demanded Valamir's resignation. But after that conversation, he's probably like, I got to think better about this. I got to think more critically. And be more empathetic. Hey, look at that. Good on you, Croy. And Tunney lives to steal another bottle of brandy or something and down another recruit. Poor Tunney. So I'll give it a 4 and a knuckle. And now we will move on to our final segment of this episode, which is our character spot. Boys, who else could we spotlight but...
Poor Trooper Worth.
Poor Trooper Private Worth, Private Trooper Worth, Private Lance, Private Trooper Worth.
The privates of Trooper Worth were truly disemboweled in this book.
Disemboweled.
The privates of Worth were laid bare in that field of barley.
Didn't we all think he was going to die from dysentery or something?
I swear to God, I thought he did die from dysentery until like reading this again. I was like, oh right, no, he dies from a fucking bolt in the chest. That's completely different. Poor kid.
It's so tragic as well that it's after the battle's ended. Like the piece is going to be drawn up and
For
everything.
real, I would have been tight.
Man, that's so fucking unlucky.
It really is.
And I'm fairly certain I think it might be maybe company, not what's it called, Band of Brothers. I think something similar happens.
Oh yeah, something similar happens
after the war's over and one of them gets shot by accident or something like that.
Yeah, they get shot by somebody on patrol. He was with... I actually just watched Band of Brothers like last week. It was Lieutenant Moose Heilig.
Right, exactly. Yeah. That's almost exactly what happens here, isn't it? I'm sure.
Yeah, but Moose survives. He does survive, but
fair enough. Yeah,
he does survive.
It just goes to show, doesn't it? Like this whole the whole endeavor is not good for people because they're so fucking worried about keeping an eye out for people that they'll shoot their own side.
Of course, Joe has to be like, "Oh yeah, you guys I almost forgot about friendly fire. My bad, guys. He had to include it. It's part of war."
Sorry.
Oh, Trooper Worth, we hardly knew you.
Hardly knew you, my boy. Trooper Worth. Trooper Worth. Trooper Worth. Well, we knew that you love to take shits, or maybe you just couldn't help yourself. Whatever the case may be.
Yeah, I was gonna say he probably didn't enjoy it at all. He probably hated it.
Yeah, you're right. He probably did not enjoy it at all. You are right. But no man should go out at the hand of his fellow soldier, Gorst. But
And at least he didn't get caught with his trousers down. At least he managed to finish his last movement before being shot.
You're right.
Maybe he felt some relief in the end.
You said maybe he felt some relief in the end.
Oh dear. I think that's all we have to say about Worth, isn't it? He doesn't really do much, does he?
He spends the whole time shitting, which is another part of war. So thank you for your contribution to the book.
Exactly. There's two big parts of war there. Diarrhea and friendly fire.
Diarrhea and friendly. Oh man was digging his own personal latrine every time. Holy shit. Well, I guess that's, gotta maintain cleanliness and all that. Excuse me. Sorry about that. But Worth, we shall remember you fondly for about 3 days. And then after that, once again, we hardly knew ye. Rest in peace. That's our show, everyone. We want to thank you all for listening and supporting this podcast. As you know, this is a passion project for the three of us, and your support means oh so much.
Join us next week as we cover End of the Road and By the Sword.
And make sure you follow us on all of our social media, check out the website, and shoot us an email at circleoftheworldpodcast@gmail.com.
And if you haven't already, please subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from. And please make sure to rate and review us. Thank you all again for listening.
Well, well, well.